until the Arabs start loving their children more than they hate us, I don't know, Steve, if we'll ever see an end to the war.
It's a new year, but challenges for the Jewish people are still the same. Let's talk about it with Jonathan Feldstein on Steve Brown.
He's an old white guy, an author, broadcaster, and seminary professor who's sick of religion. And he's brought friends. Please welcome Steve Brown, etc.
Hey, we're so glad you're here, and you're going to be glad you're here too. You're going to hear the inside that you sometimes don't hear in the mainline media, and we're going to find out some stuff that is very, very important with our friend Jonathan. In case you're wondering, I'm Steve, the aforementioned old white guy. Matthew Porter is our executive producer. Is there anything you got for Christmas that you need to return?
Well, if somebody could tell me where to return about 10 extra pounds, I'd appreciate that. They're not wanted.
Ain't gonna work.
No.
Our producer Jeremy is in the little glass booth. His music is being played on ESPN all over America. Is that cool or what? Jeremy says New Year's resolutions are something that go in 1 year and after. I don't believe you made me say
That
this.
was funny, man.
Listen, I just go through the greeting cards and just steal whatever I want.
That's rock solid.
Yeah.
Courtesy of Hallmark.
Our one-man IT department, John Myers, is in the tech bunker. John edits out any mistakes we make. That's why this program is so short. And Dr. George Bingham is the president of Key Life. George again reminds you that burning cookie-scented candles should be a crime. And Kathy is the soft feminine side. That would be Kathy Wyatt of this program. Kathy hopes everyone's troubles last only as long as their New Year's resolutions.
Well, that's the truth.
You know, I've been looking forward to this. Jonathan Feldstein is a relatively new friend of mine, and it's rare when I know somebody for a fairly short time that I admire them so much. Jonathan is the founder and president of the Genesis 123 Foundation. He was born and educated in the U.S. and immigrated to Israel in 2004. And throughout his life and career, Jonathan has followed the call to fellowship with Christians in order to serve as a bridge between Jews and Christians. And we're family. And I'm glad he's doing that. He's trying to help connect Christians to Israel in a meaningful way. We're recording this, by the way, in mid-December, and it'll be aired early in January. And so you may take that into account with events that will happen in the between time. Like the old monster Assad has fallen in Assyria, and there are tears shed in Iran, and I rather would get a bottle of champagne and celebrate. Jonathan, talk to us about Assyria, and then we'll get into some things about Israel.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. It's affection reciprocated, and it's really great to be back with you. What we're seeing, you give me a chance by recording this a couple of weeks before it's going to be heard, to either be a prophet or a false prophet. But what is fascinating, and it's shocking, for most of my life, we've had an Assad father or son leading Syria, brutal dictators, truly giving definition to the notion of genocide. and crimes against humanity and being a tremendous threat against Israel and against Syrians. And that's something that we should also care for.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, we woke up on a day in December and saw that there's no Assad anymore. And what that means is yet to be told. Any day on all the ensuing days between this conversation and a couple of weeks from now, and certainly the inauguration of President Trump in a few weeks from now, can change things radically. But what I do know is that what we've seen play out in the last weeks and the last year plus since Israel has been subject to this horrific war is we've seen Iran lose now on three fronts. We've seen essentially, while there are threats to us still in Gaza and soldiers were killed in Gaza again, and as of my most recent visit a few weeks ago to the Gaza border, I'll tell you what, there's still a tremendous amount of artillery fire going in, and as we speak, there's still 100 hostages who are being held captive in Gaza. But Hamas has by and large lost, and that is a major loss for Iran and its influence and the huge investment that it's made there. Similarly, we've seen a more significant loss, but a remaining threat in Lebanon with Hezbollah. And the third domino that just fell is this land bridge with the Assad regime. And to my prayer, and now that we're a month away from the 46th anniversary of the Iranian Revolution, I'm praying that they won't see a 47th year.
Oh, yeah, me too. By the way, it drives me nuts to see the anti-Semitism that is in so many places in our country and the charges of genocide. That makes me, and you ever hear a preacher cuss? And that would be one. Would you like to address the genocide charges?
Let's just say this. If Israel's committing genocide, we're the suckiest people ever at committing genocide. What I know, first of all, there's no genocide in Gaza. There's 2.3 million Gazans. And even if you believe the Hamas claims and numbers, which include all the terrorists, they're talking about approximately 42,000 deaths. But if half of those are terrorists, and Israel knows that, then we know that we're being really, really precise. Having a son and son-in-law who've served in Gaza, I also know it's not just so simple to say innocent civilians, because there are very few innocent civilians. And that's not to say that there's not actual suffering. But no, there's no genocide. It's nonsensical. We still remain, if not one of the most moral armies in the world.
Absolutely.
And you can see that by being along the Gaza border, as I've done many times. And you can see the soldiers going in and coming out, proud of the fact that their combat is very precise.
You brought up the subject of the hostages. As you know, President-elect Trump said if the hostages were not returned by the time he was in office, there would be hell to pay. Would you comment on that?
The big concern on that, I would say two things. First of all, terrorists don't particularly care, especially terrorists who have been bloodied the way they have. I don't believe that they care so much about Donald Trump's threats, other than continuing to arm Israel and maybe take out the head of the operation in Qatar or Turkey, wherever the Hamas leaders are hiding out now. And they might care, but I don't know that the actual terrorists who are holding the hostages, living or dead in Gaza, terribly much care about Donald Trump putting something on Truth. What's his platform called?
Truth Social.
Yeah.
Truth Social, or on Twitter, saying that they'll be hell to pay. I pray that I'm wrong. We just surpassed the length of the hostage crisis in Iran that we all remember from our youth,
Yeah.
444 days. with human beings still being held hostage. And honestly, Steve, the other thing I would say that scares me to articulate it, but I do believe it. I think that there's some of the bodies that we're never going to find. I
Yeah.
think that some of them may have intuitively been smuggled out through the tunnels under the Egyptian border and could be held in Sinai or in Yemen or even in Tehran, and we may never know that.
You know, it's interesting you compare the Iranian hostage taking of years ago. The hostages were released as Reagan took office. So maybe something, you know, most people think Trump's crazy and he'll do something, and he might. You know, I don't think they've got him figured, and I think that can be, well, I hope you're wrong. I hope that they release them, and and I'm sure that's exactly what you think. Guys, I hate interrupting conversations selling product when they're great conversations, but must be done. Besides, this is really hard work, and we, as I've told you several times, need to take breaks so that we can have some milk and cookies and rest up and prepare ourselves for the strenuous task of continuing these interviews. And if you believe that that's anything but filling time, there's something wrong with you. By the way, we're going to return. Don't go anywhere. Hey, thanks for joining us. We're talking to Jonathan Feldstein. Jonathan serves as the founder and president of Genesis 123 Foundation. Check it out, a nonprofit created to build bridges between Jews and Christians with Israel in ways that are new and unique and meaningful.
Jonathan, I'm not naming names, but there was a politician in the last several months who, when asked about the situation that we're talking about, said that she, her intention was to get a deal done. That's not as positive a solution or an approach to it as it looks like on the surface, is it?
No, that's a not. In fact, I think I even wrote it about it. One of my articles a few months ago was "Getting a Deal Done is not a foreign policy." That's a ridiculous statement for a hypothetical politician whose middle name is Vapid. And who played all sides trying and got neither side to support. No, a deal done is no longer a viable solution. A ceasefire, to be very candid, is no longer a solution. Not that Israel was ever looking for this war, but what's necessary from the head of the octopus in Tehran all the way down is a sweeping victory, and we've seen that play out. And anyone who just talks about getting a deal done simply kicks the can down the road for me and my children and my grandchildren to have to deal with this in subsequent generations.
So true. And your resistance to the shallow calls for that are by people who simply don't know what they're talking about. You know, we live, well, that's decreasing, but we live in relative safety, and it's so easy to say stupid things about what's going on in Israel.
Jonathan, one of the things that seemed to be, and hearkening back to the previous administration, which will shortly become the future administration, the Abraham Accords seemed to be a very positive step, and then kind of got stalemated or slowed down or something. Do you have hope for a revival of that or even expansion of that as we look forward toward the new administration?
The short answer is yes, absolutely. And if we rewind, it seems very hard to do. Not quite a year and a half ago, but a year and a half ago, we were talking about an imminent deal, a normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia. And then the war happened, and many people speculated that Hamas attacked when they did, at least in part, to undermine that whole idea of a Saudi normalization. I don't know if we'll ever know factually, but that certainly did undermine or slow down that. But I think what we're seeing with the mother of the jihadis in Tehran, with the Ayatollahs and the Islamic regime, and that it's a threat to the entire Middle East, which most of which is Sunni. They don't like each other. They'll kill each other very happily, the Sunnis and the Shia. I think that we're definitely seeing a practical um, uh, Arab Middle East that's emerging. It could even happen in Syria, but certainly that will, I believe, that it will widen with Saudis. We have to remember that President Trump in his first administration, his first stop of his first international trip was to Saudi Arabia. And I think that he understands that Biden hasn't been able to pick up on that. And there are other Arab and certainly other Islamic countries that I believe will pick up on it, where they're realizing finally that Israel is not the problem, but part of the solution.
So good and so true.
Jonathan, last year when we talked with you, we talked about the book for which you were responsible, which we gave as here at Key Life gave as a major donor gift. And here in the States, we refer to it as a coffee table book because it's a perfect book to put on your coffee table and just watch people gravitate to picking it up. The pictures are just absolutely marvelous of the country. And then, of course, some really wonderful articles by various Christian notables, shall we call them, from around the country, et cetera. Would you talk a little bit about, because I suspect that we have a lot of new listeners who are not familiar with it, so would you tell us a little bit about that? Because people really do need to get this book.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. So the book is called Israel the Miracle. The website is israelthemiracle.com. And if I'm not mistaken, if you go and use the coupon code Steve Brown, you'll get a 10% discount if people want to go ahead and order it, because we're very thrilled that this old white guy, Steve Brown, is one of the 75 authors. But this was a vision that God gave me. I've been speaking about it a lot recently. I was sitting in a hotel room alone in Dallas the last week of October 22. It's about 6 months before Israel's 75th anniversary. And it wasn't, I'm like, present company included, I'm never the smartest guy in the room unless I'm the only guy in the room. And I can't take credit for putting a piece of white paper on the desk and saying, great, what can we do? So this is a straight download from God to get 75 essays by 75 Christian leaders from all over the world, from every continent except Antarctica, multi-denominations, multi-ethnic, both genders. There's another people in their 20s till their 90s. We got what I believe is being called Pat Robertson's final testament on Israel, which we took out of alphabetical order and put in the front of the book. And it's not just stunning as a coffee table book, but it's historic. It's historic because no one's ever done this before. It's historic because it is that testament. It's like a time capsule. Yes, it came out, it was only published 2 weeks before the war began, which also makes it very prophetic. If you go back and look at some of the essays by the former president of Guatemala, who was, as a Christian, chose to move his country's embassy to Jerusalem. Colonel Richard Kemp, as a Christian, writing about why Israel's army is such a great army, and that's so relevant today, and many of the other essays. And honestly, I give all the credit to God for the idea. It was a lot of work to corral 75 essays from all over the world and then translate some of them into English. But what we have, at israelthemiracle.com is just an unbelievable testament to the reality that Jews and Christians both need to be underscore, which is the reality of Christian support for Israel and how biblically rooted that is.
Yeah, so good. Jonathan was telling us that he's been telling people you ought to buy two. Because if you give one away, it means you won't have one. In fact, you ought to buy one for everybody in the family. Because when you die, they're going to fight over it. So go get this book. It really is an amazing and a beautiful book. And it's a good way to get conversation going in your household about a very, very important topic that so many avoid. Guys, we're talking to Jonathan Feldstein, and we're talking about Israel and Syria and the world and war. Don't go anyplace. Hey, we're glad you're with us. We're hanging out with Jonathan Feldstein. Jonathan serves as the founder and president of Genesis 123 Foundation. And write this down. You can keep up with his word at genesis123.co, not com, because you'll get a pornographic site. You just don't want to. You just want. Hey, Jonathan, talk to us about the war. There's nothing good about war except when good people win a war and something is settled. And in this country, we either get a skewed view of what's going on with Hezbollah and Hamas and with Iran's involvement, or we get nothing. So you're going to have to let us know what's going on, what we can pray for, and what we can rejoice over.
Wow, that's a lot. Okay. Sometimes there are good things in war, but we have to be looking for them. There have been in the last almost a year and a half countless miracles, tremendous suffering, several hundred, 800 or so soldiers killed, leaving behind many spouses, widows, thousands of orphans, and tens of thousands of soldiers who have been injured, plus the hostages and all of the families. And I'll speak personally. I think every Israeli is suffering some level of trauma, and we'll carry that in our DNA for the next 50 years, the same way that we did for 50 years from the Yom Kippur War, which the 50th anniversary of which was the day before Hamas attacked a little over a year ago. But there have been countless miracles. It's amazing to be able to go into Gaza and know that by and large Hamas has been rooted out. We didn't expect that kind of threat from Gaza. To see the very, very well planned and executed attack against Hezbollah in Lebanon, from exploding beepers and walkie-talkies, disabling many of their top leaders who were important enough to have their beepers and walkie-talkies. And probably you don't know this, but when that text message came in, it somehow required them to have to hold their beeper with both hands. So disabled both of their hands. That was also incredible ingenuity.
It was
taking out the leaders. All of that's really critical. But I'll mention this, we just passed Hanukkah. And Hanukkah, a lot of people know in America, is a miracle of the rededication of the temple. We'll talk a little bit about olive oil, the oil that was required to rededicate the temple. But Hanukkah, first and foremost, was a military victory. And that we continue to see these victories unfolding in our lives today. How to pray? We need to continue to pray for the safety and success of the soldiers, and for the peace and comfort, not just of Israel generally, but of 10 million Israelis. And I can tell you that I think at least my two oldest grandchildren, 6 and 4, have trauma, experiencing trauma, and that may carry out. So that kind of peace is something that we need to pray for.
You feel positive, if you can be positive about war, but you feel positive about the direction and that it's moving to an end with the goals that Israel has set being achieved?
It's a great question. It's very hard to see an end of the war because when you're speaking of war, you're probably speaking of combat. And one of the projects that we launched in 24 is called solutionforpeaceingaza.com. And it's really innovative. But why is it so? It's so innovative because it's calling on Christians to roll up their sleeves and be responsible for the rehabilitation physically and spiritually of Gaza. But what's significant about that, and why I'm not sure that barring such a solution, the war in the big terms will ever end, because the war is a war against jihadis. The war is against people who raise their children, to indoctrinate their children to believe that Jews and the Jewish state have not no legitimacy, but no justification, and therefore must be fought and resisted. And without that change of heart, without a radical change, where, as Golda Meir said in my youth, until the Arabs start loving their children more than they hate us, I don't know, Steve, if we'll ever see an end to the war.
Oh, I hope you're wrong. I was talking about battle, of course, but you're right. Something supernatural needs to happen, doesn't it?
Solutionforpeaceingaza.com, and that will be the largest missions trip in the world, and that is the supernatural answer, to give radical jihadis an exposure to a loving God for the first time.
We're coming up on a break, and if we don't have time to get into it, but let's talk about that on the other side of the break.
Great.
Because that is innovative and exciting, and it's something that God, I think, would rejoice in as Christians get involved. At any rate, you check with the Genesis 123 Foundation, and you can keep up with Jonathan's work at Genesis123.co, not .com. Because, as I told you, you don't want to go there with your children around. Jonathan Feldstein, and we're talking about Israel and war and God's supernatural intervention. By the way, have you heard about Key Life Connection? That's our free weekly email, and it delivers our best articles, sermons, videos, blogs to your inbox. You ought to try it today and let us know what you think. But if you're critical, don't be too critical. It's free. And that's why we make it free. Jonathan, we were talking about Christians' involvement in seeing the end of the, quote, war. Talk to us about that.
Right. So we've seen even U.S. State Department and other Biden administration officials talk about how you can have a military defeat of Hamas in Gaza specifically, but you can't defeat their ideology. And I don't remember which one. It's on the website solutionforpeaceingaza.com. We pull out their own quotes. You can't defeat an ideology without a different and arguably, of course, better ideology. So when I look at my oldest grandchildren, well, all of my grandsons, 3 months to 6 years, um, I know that they'll be conscripted in 12, 13 years, and that's a crazy thought. That's a
Yeah.
short time. But my concern is, are they going to come across jihadi little children now who are being raised to slaughter us? And my realization, and actually it was just a year ago, on Christmas, I wrote an article in the Times of Israel called "The Solution for Peace in Gaza is Jesus." Now that's very radical for an Orthodox Jew to be
Yeah, I
writing,
would say.
and I wrote it to be very edgy, to be tongue in cheek, and to undermine the foolish notion of a two-state solution. And that's for a deeper conversation about why that didn't work and can't work, especially now. But when I wrote it, and then Christian friends started reading it, they said, "Yeah, actually, that's true." And then I thought, okay, it's not just an edgy idea, but it's truth, because there is no solution to change the hearts of Gazans. They're not going to become Buddhists, although I'm sure there are many nice Buddhists. They do believe nominally they believe in a God, and they have hijacked Islam has hijacked enough of Christianity and Judaism that they can relate to Jesus, and they understand that Abraham was significant, and they might even know that there's a covenant between God and Abraham and the Jewish people. And so our solution is that we need, I've been cautioned to say, not to say an army of Christians, but a mass of Christians, 100,000 or 200,000 Christians, to take responsibility, to go to Gaza, to be responsible for rebuilding and rebuilding everything that anyone who's following now can imagine in their own community. You need public streets, you need residential units, you need schools, you need hospitals, you need nutrition, you need everything that possibly could be in a society. But I want to see Christians going in to rebuild Gaza shoulder to shoulder with the Gazans. And through that, and I'm not necessarily advocating radical evangelism, although I'm not opposed to that either, by exposure to Christians who have a relationship with the God of Israel, who love Israel and the Jewish people, who will express that love and not want Gazans to harm Israel and the Jewish people, but conversely also love Gazans and don't want them to rebuild a terror army that's going to threaten us or be bad and ultimately suicidal for themselves. And the more that we've promoted this, the more that I truly realize that is the only solution. And I wish someone would tell me, no, you're wrong. There's a better solution. If there's a better solution, I tell people, bring it. But there isn't a better solution. So we're promoting the solution for peace in Gaza. And I pray that that will actually see realization so that in 5 years, 10 years, I can drive an hour and a half to the Gaza beach and get a kosher hamburger.
So good. Do you? Where's the website? People can check that idea out.
Solutionforpeaceingaza.com, and we're obviously using some contacts with the Trump administration. We want this to be, it must be bipartisan, multi-denominational. Anyone who cares, as I do, I'm an Orthodox Israeli Jewish settler, but I want well-being, I want peace, I want my grandchildren not to have to encounter in 12, 13, 15 years jihadi 12, 20-year-old kids who still want to slaughter us. And I don't have another solution. There isn't another solution.
As you travel and you're speaking in a number of places around the country, are you speaking about this, and what kind of response are you getting from Christians?
The response, as you can imagine, from Christians is very exciting. I'm very candid with you. In order to make something like this happen, we need, just to launch it, we need a upper six-figure budget, because it requires buy-in. It requires it requires a lot of laying of the ground. And right now, no one stepped up on that level yet. But the excitement, the purpose, people saying, I'll go, I'll go, I'll go, because they see, as I said earlier, this will be the biggest missions trip ever to rehabilitate a whole society. And once it does, then I believe that that's kind of the paradigm for what can happen and probably needs to happen in the Arab and Islamic world. As far as Israel is not the center of the problem, but it becomes the center of their focus. We talked about it with the Saudis and other Arab and Islamic countries. Israel needs to be viewed as the solution for peace in the Middle East and for prosperity. And I think it's only through that dynamic relationship of you as Christians and us as Jews and coming together to bless and support prosperity in Gaza. I think that's a winning solution.
Oh man, just thinking about it is exciting. The possibilities are absolutely amazing, and I'm not surprised that it came from you.
It came from God through me.
I know, of course, but but it came from you, and you never surprise me, but you amaze me a lot. And,
Thank you.
And this idea is one of those. Jonathan, I know with the speaking tour and all the pies in which you have your fingers, you don't have a lot of time. And that you would take an hour with us is appreciated more than you know. And I hope we can do it again soon. God bless you. And try not to screw it up when you're speaking around the country, okay?
Try. Now I have a good reason.
Hey, listen, the website is genesis123.co. And that's the 123 Foundation. You can find out why it's called that, and you can see what God is doing in a wonderful way with some people that are making an impact on the world. Guys, we'll tell you who we're going to do it unto next week. You'll be amazed. Don't go anywhere. What a great hour, and especially the way the plane was landed. I think, and I'm not an expert on it, I've spent some time in Israel. I love Israel. I love Jews. I see them as a part of our family in a very specific and different way. And I do think that there's going to be a coming together in an amazing way to see God do things that will blow us away. It's not just what's going on in Israel, though what Jonathan said is exciting and revolutionary. It's the fact that that we are out of the same stock. There's a dividing wall that has been broken down, the Apostle Paul said. And Paul said a lot in Romans. Some of it seems obtuse about the relationship between Jews and Christians. Jesus is the Messiah. Ruth Graham did a book of poems one time, and she had a, and I read it in Switzerland when I was depressed. That book of poems, and it really meant a lot to me. But in one of them, there's an old Jewish man who she ends the poem with the Jewish man saying, When he comes, I will ask him, is this the first time or the second time? That's a good statement that Jews and Christians both understand, and we understand a lot. Paul said that we've been kind of grafted on, and they're the natural root. And so there's something, and I don't know what it is, but where God's going to act, and it's going to have to do with Jews and Christians, and mainly to do with Jesus himself. Okay, what are we going to do next week?
We have no idea.
Oh, that's good planning.
Well, I have nothing to say.
Listen, if nobody shows, it will be a great program.
Oh, we'll
because
have something.
We'll be here. And if nobody else is, we're brilliant, we're wise, we're profound.
We're filling
and
time.
And we're filling time. And we will prepare something really good for you. You're going to like it, whatever it is. Oh,
You're not
I
done
couldn't
yet.
think of anything else to say.
Well, you're in trouble.
Guys, we're out of here, but we're going to come back next week. Same time, same place. Hope you join us. Between now and then, don't do anything we wouldn't. And that gives you a wide, wide berth.
I think we need to get you some dominoes.